Well, I have to say good day to all of you. You've had your lunch, and I'm just thinking, after having a full stomach, you guys are all ready for a nap, and it's not going to happen with me. One thing I have to say is that I was a professor of psychology for 11 years, and I was, when I came into the room, I was asking Nazarian, who has been so kind enough to invite me to this organization to come and speak, that I'm always so excited when I see the new generation coming and listening to really thought leadership programs. And obviously I know many of you are university students, and I used to teach at Cal State Long Beach. Yes, I knew I had Long Beach people here. And yes, women's studies and ethnic studies and statistics and research at Long Beach. And so as I was making my way down 405 freeway, I was just sending love to my school. Yes, I know somebody, yes, good for you. I do want to talk about the role of women in leadership around the world. I do want to stress that my background, because it's in psychology, that I have a very humanistic approach in talking about it. And my recent book, Pioneers of the Possible, celebrating 20 visionary women of the world, really dissects the leadership and the life stories of many women who did pioneering work around the world that really changed the landscape of the fields that they were working in. So I'm hoping I'm going to be pressing this in the right direction, or I'm not. Am I doing this? It's not working. Okay, I'm going to be pointing to you, unfortunately. So I want to begin talking about Dilma Rousseff. Dilma Rousseff is the first woman to become president of Brazil, which is an incredible opportunity, especially because Brazil is the largest democracy in South America. And Dilma Rousseff recently was at the United Nations, and she had the following address. She said, "I speak to you with a feminine voice. I'm certain, ladies and gentlemen, that this will be the women's century. In the Portuguese language, words such as life, soul, hope are all of the feminine gender, as are other words like courage and sincerity." And so if we were to nurture all these skills within ourselves, these attributes within ourselves, no matter if we're male or female, we could be better leaders in the world. I do have a feminine slant, so forgive me, males, for listening to this, but I do think that it's wonderful to have a diverse group of people here, because women want to be equal partners in leadership. It's not about that men are not effective, men are very effective, but women bring a different perspective, and that's what's important. After all, women have played a very pivotal role in the development of society. They are the heart of their homes and communities. But even though we've seen some of the greatest strides in women's involvement in leadership positions, we still have a long way to go. Take, for example, the United States, where women have enjoyed one of the best opportunities for growth. So can you guess how many of the Fortune 500 companies are led by women? Just a guess. Just raise your hand and speak out. 15, okay. Anybody else? It's a little higher. 5. It's 21. With Marissa Mayer that got chosen, it was 21. And it's very interesting because when Marissa Mayer became the 21st and actually one of the youngest CEOs to lead a Fortune 500 company, most of the research, most of the articles that came out was saying how's she going to balance work and family, and she's pregnant. I'm sure if a man was, his wife was having a child, they wouldn't be putting front page things about the pregnancy. Again, let's talk about the Congress. Only 19% of the women are in Congress. So then we look at the Nobel Peace Prize winners, which has been of particular interest in me. So if you look at the statistics of Nobel laureates since 1901, only a handful of women have gotten this award. What's really interesting, though, is that in the past decade, more and more women are being given that award because there have been some trailblazing women in the developing countries that have really served as the conscience of their country. And they have been given that award, and I want to talk to you about that. Before talking about the women, I do want to, you have to, I'm so sorry, you have to press that. If you're familiar with Melanie Revere, she is, or was up until last month, the United States Department's ambassador at large for global women's issues. And she always has said that the vibrancy of potential democracies in the world is directly related to the participation of women. And if you know about her work, she was one of the founders of Vital Voices, which was really spearheaded by the White House. And Vital Voices is really trying to nurture leadership in 141 countries right now, women in leadership. So this is a very telling statement because proof of it really exists in various countries. So I'm going off some of the research that I did in my recent book, and I want to talk about Wangari Maathai. How many of you have heard of Wangari Maathai? A few. I had the privilege of meeting her a few years ago, and unfortunately she passed away probably 10 months ago to cancer. But she was the first African-American woman to have won the Nobel Prize, and also the first environmentalist. And Wangari's story is quite incredible because you see that although she was an environmentalist, and she literally sparked a movement among the women in the sub-Saharan continent to plant over 13 million trees, her coalition of women really brought about the downfall of the Mao dictatorship. And she got her Nobel Prize because of that, because her life was in danger, and the Nobel Committee wanted to give her that kind of recognition so that she would be safe. So her life story is quite amazing. And when you when I asked Wangari why she really put herself in such life-threatening situations to do something like this, to bring down a dictatorship, and she spoke like a true mother, and she said, I don't want my kids, I don't want our kids to inherit a country that will later on be in shambles. So, sorry, the next one. The next one is, I'll talk about Marina Silva. You know, contrary to most people, and I always talk about this to a lot of organizations, is that most people think that in order for people to affect change, you have to have an Ivy League school education, that you must have really gone through an interesting route where you have had the good education and then you go into formal organizations to bring about change. And believe it or not, a lot of the women that I have studied, that has not been the case. That has absolutely not been the case. And you'll be flabbergasted to hear about Marina Silva. Marina, as a matter of fact, actually ran against Dilma Rousseff, and Dilma won. But nevertheless, just imagine that Marina Silva was illiterate until the age of 16. So when people come to me and they tell me that they can't do something, I say, well, let's think about it. Marina Silva was raised deep in the Amazon. where there was no running water, no electricity, no TV, no flush toilets, nothing. Her mother died when she was 10 years old. She had gotten hepatitis. Her brother had died. And actually, the only reason that she came out of the Amazon forest to the city was to get help for her hepatitis. There, she decided to stay, and she took night classes to start to read. Meanwhile, she was a housekeeper. She cleaned homes during the day. Can you believe that after that, she actually went on to get her master's degree, but while doing all of that, she managed to have children, she got married, she had children. She was part of many very, very influential coalitions for the rights of the Amazonians to save the trees in the Amazon. As a matter of fact, she has gotten the Prince of Austrias Award, which is one of the most elite and most admired awards to get. And she's been coined as the Al Gore of Brazil. She really had a runoff with Dilma. So she did very well, but it's very great to know that now that Dilma is in power, a lot of the women in her cabinet are as well women. Next slide is, I will be talking about Rigoberta Menchú. Again, Rigoberta Menchú is from Guatemala. A woman with no real solid education, and a woman whom, again, I had the pleasure of meeting a few years ago, who is the first Indian woman, native Indian woman from Guatemala to have gotten the Nobel Prize, but also the youngest woman in history of Nobel Peace Prize to have gotten this. This is incredible, right? It's incredible. And what's really interesting is that when you study the life stories of these spectacular women, you see how important it was for them to have fathers who were encouraging. Marina Silva, absolutely. And when Rigoberta talks in her interviews, she always talks about her father, how her father actually mentored her in politics. And again, she came from one of the most underprivileged sectors of her community. But what's quite amazing about Rigoberta Menchú is that she formed a coalition with Wangari Maathai and Shirin Ebadi. I'm always so proud of my own Persian heritage. So I make sure to put a little nod for Shirin as well, that they have formed a group that promotes peace building. And in the words of our own iconic human rights advocate, Shirin Ebadi, nothing useful or lasting can emerge from violence. And really, it's really interesting because research, from a research standpoint, it's shown that women view potential crises and situations from many different angles and perspective, which is very good with negotiations. As a matter of fact, it's very interesting. Just a month ago, I had gone to visit my mother, and she's an old school, very old world Iranian woman. And I said, you know, Mom, I'm reading all this fascinating research, how women can be better peace negotiators. They're just better negotiators. And then she just said to me, you have to go read all those books to know that women are negotiators. She goes, haven't you met our Persian women? Just look at me. And it's very true. I have to say, just last summer I was in Turkey with her, and I swear to God, the shopkeeper wanted to give away stuff so that she would stop negotiating. So it is very true that women have a different method and a different way of looking at things. Studies also show that themes of equity and justice are at the center of women's consciousness. As a matter of fact, I also did research and I covered Helen Suzman in my book. And Helen Suzman was dubbed as the conscience of South Africa. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of Helen Suzman. Okay, a few. You know, she was twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And Helen Suzman was, it's interesting, she got married at the age of 20 to a well-to-do cardiologist. She dropped out of school and had 2 kids. But after raising her kids when they were a little bit older, she went back to school and finished up work, and then she became a professor of economics. Believe it or not, slowly, slowly she got interested in politics. And here's a middle-class, upper-middle-class Jewish woman who became the only person in the parliament of South Africa that opposed apartheid. As a matter of fact, she was the only person that opposed apartheid for 13 years, the only parliamentarian. And when Nelson Mandela was in prison, she was the only person that went to visit him. So the day that he was released, obviously Nelson wanted to go, and Nelson Mandela went to visit his family. But right after visiting his family, he went to Helen Suzman to thank her. So it is really incredible that how, yes, women do have this extraordinary sense of justice and equity in the world. So we go to another theme is that what are the key ingredients for successful leadership for women? Because I talked about all these women. They're from different parts of the world with completely different backgrounds. And what is it that makes them successful? So the number one thing that I think makes someone very effective in leadership is gathering around a group of like-minded people that can amplify their voice. That becomes essential. When Arianna Huffington was reviewing my book, she said that every woman needs a fearless tribe of other people to support her vision. And that is exactly true. So I want to lead in to the story of Master Cheng Yen. And Master Cheng Yen, again, she has never won an award, a Nobel Prize, but she has been nominated. Master Cheng Yen has a 6th grade education, lives in Taiwan. She founded her own sect of Buddhism that's 10 million followers strong. And she has the world's biggest nonprofit emergency care organization in the world, with an endowment that's reaching $1 billion and an annual giving of $350 million. When Hurricane Katrina hit the United States, she was the first person to dispatch volunteers there and gave $14 million right on the spot. So her kind of giving is a giving that does not exclude any ethnicity or religion or background. As a matter of fact, you know, Taiwan has not enjoyed the best relationship with China, but yet she has actually given so much help to China, which has bettered the relationship as well. So what I'm trying to say is that when you ask people what makes Tzu Chi, her foundation, such an important foundation, they always say it's her spirit. When interviewed, she always says, never underestimate the power of one person. And it's very true, because with her vision, she's brought about millions of people who really act according to this very noble vision that she's had in the world. The second ingredient of the most effective female leaders, thank you, is not only just being resilient and brave, but women who are real extraordinary leaders, they think out of the box. There has to be some sort of paradigm shift. Because if you think that you're going to change something by doing the same old things, it's not going to help, right? So it's really interesting because some research has shown that true leaders also have a different definition of what power is. And women's relationship to power could be very different than men's relationship to power. So their definition to power, and most of the women that I have interviewed, was the power to bring change, power to transform, power to really, really affect change. So I want to close by a story of a woman who seemingly had no avenue to affect change, and not really a big resource of power as we would define it traditionally. Her name is Lima Guawi. How many of you have heard of her? I sure hope that everybody comes out of this room knowing her, because she recently won the Nobel Prize, actually a few years ago. And her story is quite interesting. She was a social worker, and her country of Libya was racked by civil war for many years. And it's really interesting because she said, and last year I was in New York for a women's conference, so she was talking there, and she radiates some sort of, I don't know, charm, and you just want to listen to her. So she was talking about how Libya had been under civil war. All the kids, a lot of the teenagers there were with warlords, going from home to home, killing people randomly with machine guns, which was one of the most frightening things to see, that most families had suffered some kind of loss, some kind of death in Libya. And she had a dream one night that said, Lima, you need to pray for peace. So, although I'm a psychologist, you sometimes say, well, somebody having a dream, they're having a, dream for peace, or pray for peace. What does that really mean? But what she actually did was quite clever. She went to her church and talked about the situation and said, why don't we form a coalition? Because part of Libya is also Muslim and she's Christian. So they formed a coalition to have non-violent protests right on the football field that was in the way of where all the politicians would pass by. So the women would wore a white shirt and a white bandana, and they would sit there and pray together. This went on for months and months. And so actually her power base was again finding like-minded people that saw in her vision, and the numbers kept on growing. So it became thousands and thousands of people. So one day, as the president was going through, he decided that it's just bad PR if he weren't going to be addressing this woman, and asked for her to come and speak. So she really finagled this talk to be something very impassioned, and saying that, all our kids are dying. I want you, President Taylor, to go and step up, go to Ghana for peace negotiations. And he accepted. When he went there, oh, I have to tell you, when she said that, there was a time, he didn't exactly say, yes, I'm going to go the next day. So this is really interesting, and you men better be careful. One of the things that she did as a non-violent protest, it was no sex. So she asked all the women of Libya to stop having sex with men, and going to them and saying, do something so our kids are not going to be killed. The funny thing is that then she was interviewed saying, how effective was that? And she chuckles and says, well, I don't think all women really went by that rule. But what it really did is that campaign sparked an international media blizzard of what she was doing. So it brought a lot more attention to her cause. Again, a very different way of having a power base. So when President Taylor went to Ghana, she, along with her women, went to Ghana as well. And there's raw footage of her, which is really interesting. Sometimes they say people who are very gutsy. She was talking, she was having a sitting in the lobby of the hotel where the negotiations were taking place. And police said, you have to leave the premises. And she started screaming and saying, "You're telling me these warlords were in the bushes a few months ago not eating anything. Now they're in this big hotel eating every day. They're not going to stop negotiating. They're going to do this for months and months. I'm here to finish this up." So they held hands and they didn't let any of the men come out of the negotiation hall until they resolved it. And they did. And not only that, the president was later on charged with war crimes and was not, and he left. And so a woman became the next president, the democratic leader of Libya. So as Lima told the delegates, when we say women are essential in families and societies, it's important to remember that women are the ones that keep life going in the midst of war. If you look at history, women are not generally the ones fighting, pillaging, burning, or raping. And as this is true, it's also clear that women need to be included in the peace-building process. Thank you so much for your time.